In a world overrun with the fake, delusional, and disingenuous, he stands as a beacon of truth. He is Abuki Cabal. You are listening to Abuki Cabal.
Welcome to the Abuki Cabal Show.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Hopefully I've got my technical difficulties out of the way. I apologize for the decreased volume on the last two shows. Hopefully you guys were able to turn your volume up and be able to hear it. But on to the next show. Thanks BGS for letting me know that my volume was low. It sounded okay on my end, but I guess it came across low there. But anyway, we're moving on to the next show, and I'm going to talk about Tracee Ellis Ross and how she feels bad about waiting and prioritizing her career before getting married and having children. So, I mean, those of us who were Kevin Samuels fans, he spoke about this often, where, he told women that you should prioritize being in a relationship with the objective of being married sooner rather than later. And I mean, you see this stuff all over the place, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, don't let anybody pressure you into having a baby early and all of that. I'm going to tell you, look, I had my son pretty early, and I'm going to tell you, I cannot even imagine at 50 having a child and running around after a child and taking them to daycare and all that stuff. I can't imagine. I mean, because the older you get, the more you, less stamina you have, the less, everything is lessened. You start to have, pains and you can't run around like you did when you're young. There's all kinds of things that you go through. So, for them to sit up and tell a woman to wait, pretty much to the last minute, 35, 40, trying to have babies and whatnot. I mean, look, who was it? Debrat just, tried to have a baby here a little while ago, and they got that bad news. It's over for y'all. Can't have babies. Either one of you, both of you are old, but these people are going off of their feelings and what should be instead of what is. And the fact of the matter is that, there is a thing called geriatric pregnancy, and it's better for women to have, children in their 20s rather than in their 30s. I mean, when they tell you that your clock is ticking, your clock is truly ticking. You are more valuable young than you are old. And they have all these women up here, 60 years old, looking like they're 30 and all of that. And, it still doesn't matter. Nobody's checking for you, as a 50-year-old woman. No matter how attractive you are, you're still a 50-year-old woman. You're going to have the, the affect of a 50-year-old woman. You're going to be tired of a lot of things. A lot of things are not going to be a high priority for you. Whereas, younger women tend to, have a little aggressiveness to them about, things that men like. So, we're going to get into this and see, what Tracee has to say about this, because I think it is important that we cover this. Okay. All right, here we go.
Tracee Ellis Ross, 50,
Opens up about going through perimenopause. My ability to have a child is leaving me. Tracee Ellis Ross opened up about being single and establishing purpose. Photo Reuters Eric Gayar. Tracee Ellis Ross is still the ultimate girlfriend. In a recent episode of the We Can Do Hard Things podcast, the Pattern Beauty founder opened up about life at 50, establishing purpose outside of the romantic relationship and perimenopause. I've been single for a very long time. I have had many wonderful ins and outs of things, but no one stuck to the plan, she said. But rather than feeling limited by her romantic solitude, Ross says being single actually granted her the ability to enrich her circle of love uniquely. As a result, I get to curate my family, my chosen familying around me.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. I mean, we hear this all the time also, where, she says, she's been single for a long time, but rather than feeling bad about her decision, she basically says that being single actually granted her the ability to enrich her circle of love uniquely. What does that mean? What the hell does that mean? That's just, gobbledygook for you trying to make a bad situation better, rather than tell, these younger women that don't do what I did. You're telling them that, you got into, crystals and vibrations and all of that, and your life is so much better. No, it's not, because you're lonely and you're wondering, what's going to happen? How is it going to be for me to, live the rest of my life alone as my abilities begin to diminish? Here I am perimenopausal, I'm irritable, I'm probably spotting all the time. You're having irregular periods until they go away. You're having hot flashes. If you did have a man during this time, this is usually when men leave, because the women totally turn and become something else, once they start going through perimenopause. Some, just have no interest in sex at all. They are, mean. They just totally have a shift in their whole personality, and they become pretty selfish during this time. They don't really care about the fact that, you're with a man and you're not having sex with him, and you don't really want to be around him. You just, angry all the time, and, just a real, hellion to be around, but then everything you read up on this stuff out here, or you listen to people, and it's like, well, the man is just going to have to, understand. The man always has to just understand and just go with the flow and just, ride that wave until time is better. So how long is that supposed to last? A year, 2 years, of being around a person who's mean, having hot flashes, not getting any sex, how's that supposed to work? Being selfish, not letting that person in, not communicating. That's usually the stories that you hear men talk about during these perimenopausal, periods. But, luckily she's not with a man, and he's not having to, deal with that. But this is what she's going through. And she's trying to let you, convince you guys that, hey, it's not all bad. It wasn't a bad trade-off, but you're going to bed, by yourself every night. You don't have anybody to watch movies with. You're talking to women all the time. You got your unique circle of friends that are all women. That's why you see these women, you see all of these women traveling and whatnot, and it's like hordes of women all together traveling. Usually they're overweight. They have all of these facials and eyelashes and all that stuff, trying to ensure everybody around them that they're still attractive and they're still a catch. But they're all faking themselves out, because the men that are looking on, they know what's up. They're only fooling themselves by doing that. And then when, you get an opportunity like when Kevin was around for you to find out the truth of what men think. You hear it and then you dismiss it, which doesn't make any sense at all. But let's move on, because Tracee's going to swing back around and let you know how happy she is, I'm sure.
And I don't think I realized the gift of that until I've started to get older. And while she has struggled with the implication that being single and childless makes her a burden on her friends, she finds sordid humor in the notion that her only purpose comes from her relation to a man or her ability to procreate. We go back to this model that you're sold, that not only are we sold it, but we are fed it and we have to drink it, and it's everywhere. And if you're not careful, you actually think it's true. And it's the only bit of news for you. Which is that my job as a woman is to learn to be choosable. Having nothing to do with who I am, what makes my heart sing, floats my boat, makes me feel safe, makes me feel comfortable, makes me feel good, makes me feel powerful, makes me feel smart. Any of those things. But really it's more about how I might be seen. So that I might be chosen, so that my life could mean something as a chosen woman who then gets to have a child and then be a mother and do that for a child, she.
See what I mean? This is her, diatribe about, how it was pressed upon her to want to be choosable by a man, and how that's just a bad thing. And that's what we've been talking about, how women here in America have been convinced that a woman's role in nature is somehow bad. It makes her less than, and this is why, the passport bros are going over and doing what they're doing. This is why they're going and trying to marry women who don't find being a woman to be something that is detrimental, So let's look at some of these things that she's talking about. She says, we go back to this model that you're sold, that you're not only are we sold it, but we are fed it. We have to drink it. It's everywhere. Okay. So this is this resistance. And where does this resistance come from? Where does it start? I don't know if you guys have seen that, that documentary from, I think it was the 80s, where the black girl was saying that, she wanted a pretty baby, but she didn't want a man. She felt like she could raise a baby on her own. And the reason why that is because the government has given women so much assistance that they feel like they don't need a man. If I need protection, I can call the police. If I need, some assistance, I can go to the government. So a man is something that, you can, take or leave now. And that's the way most women think, So let's move on a little bit down here where she says, and if you're not careful, you'll start to think that it's true. That's because it is true, So then she says, and it's only a bit of news for you, which is that my job as a woman is to learn to be choosable, which, I mean, I don't know how many little girls grow up and don't, want to be. I mean, we all know that girls come up with this Disney princess, ideal system that's fed to them at a young age. So you're programmed with this at a young age. So you want to be. That's why they all think that they're queens. You can only be a queen if a king chooses you. You can't be a queen before that. So, all these little girls dream about finding this prince, that's going to make their life, better. But she would have you believe that she never felt that, never wanted that. But if you never wanted that, why are you now saying that, you have all these regrets about where you are at 50? Okay. So let's move on a little bit more here. And she says, she's talking about that being choosable and chosen is not who she is. It doesn't take into consideration, who she is or what makes her heart sing, floats her boat, makes her feel good. See, all of this stuff are the feelings that we talk about. Feelings. Everything with these women who live in fantasy is about feelings. Makes me feel comfortable, makes me feel good, makes me feel powerful, makes me feel smart. So, here you have all of these things, the things at the end are get into competition, feel powerful, feel smart. You're not going to want a man that's smarter than you, that can teach anything. You're going to want to feel powerful as that man, and then the other things are just things that women throw out there that, look, a man cannot, he can try to make you feel safe, but nowadays you got so much stuff in your head, you don't feel safe, make you feel comfortable. When have you ever known a woman having, being in the same position 1 minute to the next? You cannot, it's like you want one thing 1 minute, you want something else the next minute. You're comfortable 1 minute, you're not comfortable the next minute. You want to eat at one place 1 minute, the next minute you don't want to eat at all. You guys have chaotic and, non-linear thought processes. So that's why you start getting off into some of these things. Some of these things are just fantasy, and you have to be able to differentiate between, the line between fantasy and reality. And you want to try to get something in between there that you can mesh with, that you can live with and be happy with. But the thing is that most of the time women can never be happy. You notice how like a dog, basically tries to make its bed before it's trying to go to sleep, or a cat, and it just, needs and pushes stuff around, and it takes sometimes for the longest for it to get things just right so it can lay down. That's kind of how women are. And then they'll lay down for a minute, then they'll get up and they'll start doing the whole process over again. That's kind of what it's like to be involved with the decision-making process of a woman you're involved with. And in this case, a woman is trying to make these decisions and she's not involved with anybody. And by, in this article, you're going to see that she's still not, comfortable with the decisions that she made. She's still wondering, what if? What if I would have done this? What if I would have found a man? If I would have done this, would I have been, more, choosable? So, that's what this part is about. And it's, she's trying to explain away why this happened. So let's see if there's anything else I want to cover here. But it's really more about how she might be seen. This is important also where, women do things because of what other women think, more so than what we think as men. I find that I think most women are in competition with each other. They compete with each other about money, about where they live, about the men that they get, everything. That's all for show for other women, and we are at the mercy of that a lot of times as men, but we have to be able to recognize that and be able to get out of that process, because it'll run you into a position where you're spending money for no reason, you mess around and bankrupt yourself trying to, make this woman look good for these other people. And then when you do that, she's not going to understand why, the money's jacked up. Everything is going to be your fault, So let's move on with this.
Said. Coupled with the nuances of being a black woman in America, Ross says the projections can become hard to tune out. Everything starts to fall into that messaging. And then if you're a black woman, there's like a whole other blah, blah, blah. There's so many different versions of that. But that's like that overarching thing as a woman, she said. Story continues. Beyond the impact this can have on her romantic happenings, Ross says this messaging can also bleed over into platonic relationships as well. And then your friendships fall into that hole too. So if you haven't been chosen for a guy, then you're going to fill all that God-size hole in all those different things with a friend, and then you become the best friend. And then it just gets all real tangled and real confusing, she said. She also opened up about embracing the unknown as she reaches the end of her reproductive years. Okay,
I'm gonna stop it there. So let's talk about this little area here where she says that this overarching thing as a woman, she said, beyond its impact or the impact this can have on your romantic happenings, her romantic happenings. Okay, so you're basically having sexual relations with people, but you're not having, it doesn't go anywhere is what she's saying. So this is where, a lot of guys start talking about bodies, bodies are important to some people a lot more than others. Some men don't care about that, and then there's some men that do. There's a lot of men who can't, even think about the fact that you may have had, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30 guys before them, So you can only imagine how much sex she's had, up into her 50s. So then she talks about then your friendships fall into that hole too. So if you haven't been chosen for a man, no, if you haven't been chosen by a man, but you see how they switch that up because they don't want it to sound like the man has any agency in the process. So she goes on to say, then you're going to feel all that God-sized hole and all those different things with a friend. So then that's how she tries to pack all of these things, all of the, the relationship wishes and wants, into a friend, and that friend basically is still, having sex with her, and he becomes the guy, the go-to guy, to take with you everywhere and all that, but he doesn't have any of the, the responsibilities of a husband. So what BGS calls them are concubines. So, and then it just gets all real tangled and real confused. And you know what it means by this. I mean, this happens a lot of times when you're dealing with women, when, you say, no, this is what this is. And then they start saying, no, I thought it was something else. You did tell me that it was, that we were together and all that. And the guy's like, no, I never told you we were together. That's what that is. So Tracee's been taken down through there essentially. Okay. So now she's talking about opening up and embracing the unknown as she reaches the end of her reproductive years, and she hasn't had any children. So she's pretty much missed her opportunity to have children. And at this time, a lot of women start getting really depressed about that, because they did not get a chance to experience being a mother, and they start to look back on their lives and, shoulda, coulda, woulda themselves to death. Okay. And during that perimenopausal time, they are very, very emotional, very emotional. Things like depression and anxiety, become really, really a problem during this time. There's behaviors that they have where they take it out on people who are close to them. If you need to read up on this, especially if you're a guy and you're about to marry a lady who's older, right there before menopause. You need to prepare yourself on what you may encounter, because you may marry one woman and then end up with another one, in the same body. So let's go on here.
Going through perimenopause. So I have, for my entire life, been tethered to a very routine cycle. And I'm very connected to my body. So I would know I'm ovulating, I would have all the feelings of knowing that. And all of that is out the window. And I turn 50. And here I am in this open space now, sort of allowing the bubbling up of whatever might be here, she said. Through this, Ross says she has been forced to re-examine her relationship with femininity and what it means to be a woman beyond the patriarchal standards fed to her. As my body...
The patriarchal standards. So men made up what it is for you to be a woman, what it is to be feminine. Women, no, we didn't do this. This is just natural. This is just what happens. Women just are these things when other things don't come into the equation and confuse them. When you start giving, all these other choices, you can be this, you can be that, you can be the president, you can be whatever you want to be. And then, people aren't focused and don't have a path set that they're going to do and include the importance of being being married and being in a relationship and having kids, then those things are not inside the equation. But you're blaming the patriarchy and all of that when, me personally, I just don't believe the patriarchy exists. Not for us. So who was, pressing down on you to force you to be feminine, and to, tell you what a woman is supposed to be, because other women tell women what being a woman is. We don't tell you what a woman is. We tell you what we would like when we're choosing, and now more and more today, we are telling women what we feel a woman is, the type of woman that we feel like we would want to be with, which is becoming like the dinosaur. It's almost extinct. I think there are small pockets of reasonable women still, throughout the United States, but you might have to go through 20 ratchets before you find a good one. And then if you find the good one, she might be overweight, she might have something that you might not like, but she's going to have the other things that you like. She may cook, she may do this, she may do that, but then she's overweight. We don't really care about the short, tall, all of that, unless she's just completely, lurch like. Now if you coming around, you're looking like Lurch, and you're taller than most men, then yeah, people may have a problem with that, But other than that, men are easy. I think a lot of the things that we want are universal, but women tend to make it harder than what it is. You're adding things to the equation that just don't even need to be in there. So let's look more at what she said here. Okay. When women start throwing this patriarchal shit around, that's where they got that from. Other people told them all that. That's from reading these Oprah books and going, to a college that has these women's studies and whatnot that basically teach them that they are oppressed. They've taught them that they are oppressed. They are in the same boat as white feminists and whatnot. And we all know, Black folks know that that's not the case. Black women were working when white women were at home, chilling with the kids. So Black women have always been in the workforce. White women only started beginning in the workforce, the 70s? That they had some in the 50s and stuff, during World War II and whatnot, but they didn't really have to do that. When the men came home in the 50s, up to the 60s, most women were at home. They were housewives. Then the 70s, you had the feminist movement and, all of this stuff about, women going to college and doing all these things and having, getting into men's spaces and whatnot. And now that women are in the men's spaces, what's happening? You have all these sexual assault deals. You have, all these, I don't feel comfortable. Why are you looking at me? All these other things. Well, if you're that uncomfortable, you don't need to be in men's spaces. If you're not interested in men, you don't need to be in men's spaces. Don't come crying when you're making, all of this money and then you don't have a man, because those are the things that you chose. There are consequences for the choices that you make. Don't start talking about the patriarchy and shit. That's your choice.
becomes a foreign place to me that doesn't really feel safe or like home. And I don't know how to manage or control or fight the external binary narrative of the patriarchy that has haunted me most of my adult life. Is it my fertility that is leaving me? Is it my womanhood? Or is it really neither? But I have to fight to hold my truth, because I have been programmed so successfully by the water we all swim in, by the water we all are served. And I feel fertile with creativity, full of power, more and more a woman than I've ever been. And yet that power that I was told I must use was not used, she said, quoting an excerpt from her journal. I mean, just trying to figure out what that means. Because my ability to have a child is leaving me. But I don't agree that that's what fertile means. I don't agree that that's what woman means, she said.
See, so now this is the part where she just starts making up shit. Yeah. This is where she's trying to convince everybody else that the decision that she made wasn't a bad one, and that it empowered her more than it robbed her of her womanhood. You know, and here we go down and we start seeing these trickery words. You know, her fertility, is leaving her, and is her womanhood leaving her? Well, you're still a woman, and just the fertility part is just part of it, but you're still a woman. And this is where they get confused too with this trans stuff. But, once you can't have a baby, then the trans people think that they're a perimenopausal woman with none of the parts. And this is where women get confused with it too. And that's why we see a lot of Black women supporting this nonsense, where there's no adherence to reality, facts, science, and the history, the thousands of years of history of what it is to be a woman. That's just being thrown out of the window. And that had nothing to do with men. Women were just women. Women acted the way they acted because they were women. So here we go. But I have to fight to hold my truth. There we go with that word, my truth. Not the truth, but my truth. The truth as I have made it in my head. It's like magical. Okay? That's when you start hearing this, my truth. That's what that just means. I'm making shit up. Okay? So then we go here and it says, because I've been programmed so successfully by the water we all swim in. See, more magical thinking and magical explanations and whatnot. She just got up, and as she was walking through life, she was just bogged down by all of this explanation of how she should be, what she should be. By the water we all served. So now we served. So I guess she was serving an unknown master, which is the patriarchy, which was to, have her act a certain way, which she rebelled against, in order for her to have a life. And in the process, she lost her fertility. I mean, this is crazy, man. Just crazy. You just hear the fantastical thinking. And she says, and I feel fertile and creative, full of power. Everything is about power and creativity and everything other than the basics of being a woman. Why is a woman so fascinated? Why are all these women fascinated with power? And when they have this power, they have to lord it over the men, especially, not necessarily everybody, but just the men mostly, to show them that, hey, I can wield this power as well, So this is where I call this, penis envy, because they have this vision in their minds about what it is to be a man and to wield the power of men, and when they get it, 9 times out of 10, they misuse it. Because they think that that's how men wield the power. But men don't do that. Men tend to work better with other men, and men work well with women who are not trying to come in there and be men. You know, nobody's coming in there to abuse you. You know, but they come in thinking I'm not safe. You know, somebody might do something to me because it's been programmed into them. And this water she talks about, that water is feminism. It's not, you know, the patriarchy. It's feminism. Feminism has told her what she should be, how she should be, you know, how men are her enemy, putting pressure on her from the very beginning. You know, so then we go on here and she says, full of power, more and more a woman than I've ever been. And yet that power that I was told I must use was not used. So, you know, okay. So having a child is power. I don't think that, I really don't think that that's a proper description of having a child is. You know, I don't think it's a power. You know, I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's something, you know, that you don't feel like you are powerful once you've had a child. I mean, you ask any woman who, right after having a baby, ask her how she feels. Or if you've ever had a baby, if you listen to the show and you're a woman, you know, try to think back to how you actually felt when you had that baby. You know, if you were happy about getting pregnant in the first place, how did you feel? What was the first thing that came to your mind when you got pregnant? Through the process of carrying a life within you, of a man that you loved, you know, what was that like? And I can guarantee you that it wasn't power. That wasn't what you were thinking. So by these descriptions and by these words, I kind of understand why she's where she is. Okay, so let's move on. And then the fact that she's been journaling during the whole, you know, period of her, you know, being manless, you know, is kind of depressing as well. So let's move on.
Ross can now acknowledge that her space as a woman is not composed of her ability to have kids or get married, a realization she thanks the transgender community for. The freedom that the expansion around...
See, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. Ross can acknowledge that her space as a woman is not composed of her ability to have kids or get married, and a realization that she thanks the transgender community for. So a man who basically was born a man, lived as a man for a time, then chooses to become a woman, taught her that, you know, her being a woman is not about her ability to have kids or get married. But these trans folks want to get married. They want kids too, because what they do, the first thing they do is they go for the children. You know, and then, you know, they want to adopt and all of that other kind of stuff that they weren't able to do in the past because of their lifestyle. But now they've got the political power in place to where now they can go and adopt kids and raise them up, you know, and they can not tell people that they were born men and whatnot, and or women, you know, and you know, they have all of these powers now. And then you have them confusing women about what it is to really be a woman and what a woman should find important and what a woman shouldn't find important. You know, a trans person doesn't have to worry about all that because mostly that's their sexual orientation, you know? So they're having fun. They're having sex their entire, you know, the entire time that they're, you know, living out their fantasy. And she's listening to somebody who's essentially going through that. Through, you know, a body dysmorphia, gender dysmorphia. You know, she's listening to a person with a condition on how she should be. They want to be you, you know. They wish for your parts. The parts that you don't use, they wish they had. And then they tell you that basically you're okay. Your decision was okay. You don't have to get married. You don't have to have kids. That doesn't make you a woman. See, this is the problem now. This is why you got all of this push for feminism and transgender rights. All that's just basically an offshoot of feminism right now. Well, white feminism. And now they've gotten tricked these black women into being in league with this, with this nonsense. Tell me how this benefits our community. How it benefits mankind. How does it do that? How does it increase the birth rates? How does it keep humanity alive? I don't think that you can come to me with anything that's of any significance in that argument. But let's move on.
Gender has offered me, and the knowledge that is being shared with us by the trans community is like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you for finally unpacking something that I had no ability to unpack because of what was handed to me in a culture that thought of it in such a limited way, she said. But it is an unbelievable injustice that is laid on all of us as human beings. That there is one pathway that is informed by this random construct that somebody came up with around gender. When I pulled back from it, I'm like,
a random construct that somebody came up with? Is this how we're explaining how we as a species have perpetuated ourselves and have flourished by having children and having families? She doesn't know who came up with that? How about nature? Nature came up with it. If we were left to our own devices and we didn't have all of this surgery and all of this stuff, do you think that there would be transgender people around here? Especially if we were out still hunting and gathering and whatnot. I mean, do you think that there'd be transgendered folks around here? I just, because you wouldn't have an option. I think the problem is that we're just way too comfortable. Money and luxury and all of these things out here have made us way too comfortable. So now people have too much free time on their hands. So now all they're trying to live these fantasy land, ideas. They're trying to change, the importance of science and rules, and they're rebelling against everything. The more this article goes on, the more delusional she seems, and she's being misdirected by a whole nother community that has nothing to do with her. Nothing. She's being counseled by a trans woman on how to be a woman. Make that make sense. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense in a circus.
That's a joke. Who did that? You know what? I'm just like, who did that? That's so silly, she said. And while she may not have a husband or kids, Ross still embraces her nurturing nature. I say this to people all the time, I'm a wonderful mother. And I'm very mothering. And it's been hard for me to...
How? How are you a wonderful mother? You've never had kids. You've never had kids. So you don't know whether you're a wonderful mother because you've never been one. So you're just going to go out and just make yourself one. This is like stolen valor. I've never had a Purple Heart, so I'm just going to go out and go buy me one. And then I'm going to expect everybody to act like I got it the right way. That's what this sounds like. I've never had a husband, but I'm a great wife. Never had children, but I'm a great mother. I never worked on a car, but I'm a great mechanic. I mean, this is insane, y'all. This is insane, but this is pretty much indicative of what people are getting their information from. These are the new gods right here. These famous people are the people who are changing everybody's mental capacity and state regarding where they should be in life, what they should be doing. This is just not right. It's insane. And it's not good. People keep this away from your kids.
Claim that. In a world where I don't have the thing that says, she trails off. Later adding that she is ultimately thankful for her inquisitiveness surrounding the topic. I'm grateful to be able to look at it with curiosity instead of heartbreak. And the heartbreak does come up, and I get to hold that gently and lovingly and then say, remind myself, I woke up every morning of my life and I've tried to do my best, So I must be where I'm supposed to be. Want lifestyle and wellness news delivered to your inbox? Sign up here for Yahoo Life's newsletter.
Okay. So that last little part here. She trailed off, okay? So that's significant because that trailing off means that she was thinking introspectively about where she was, you know? And, she says she's thankful for her inquisitiveness. So, so basically she's questioning, constantly questioning. So that means that she has not locked down to any specific course in life. If you're constantly questioning, you're constantly, looking for that, what's in that next door, what's on that next floor in the women's store, all of that, that's indecision, indecisiveness. That's not a good thing. You have to be able to make a decision, lock down on it, and ride it out, but you have to do that with good information. And I fear that Tracee never had good information. We know what Diana was like. Diana was wild. She was out there, and here her kids are, going in different directions and whatnot. And this is probably indicative of, the environment that she was in, the people that she had her young daughter around, This is that, that single mother mindset. Although she was married to quite a few people. So she was skipping around. So still, I still see it the same way. You can't stay put. You can't make a decision. So you hopped around and had kids all over the place. So then she goes on and she talks about, she's grateful, to be able to look at it with curiosity instead of heartbreak. That's bull. She is heartbroken because she's up it further, earlier in the article, she was talking about how, she was feeling like her body was different than what it was. And she was, wondering, what it was going to be like to not feel the same as she did before, and feeling her ability to not have kids slipping away from her. And now to come back and say she's not heartbroken from it. This whole article is her saying that I wish I had kids. I wish I did things differently. And then some, this interaction with this trans person in the trans community has basically had her, thinking differently about her womanhood, So that means, hey, party girl, party, you're 50, but you're still beautiful, and you can get out here and you can party and you can have sex now. You don't have to worry about having kids. That's what that is. That's what they're telling her. And she's trying to find some kind of solace in the fact that, she can still, be out there a little bit until she can't be out there, but pretty soon people are going to be saying, no, we're not looking for old women. And then she's going to come back and she's going to tell about that part about it. And this part about I woke up every morning of my life and I've tried to do my best. So I must be where I'm supposed to be. So this is, I'm here. So this is where I'm supposed to be, that's bullshit. I mean, that's not correct. Okay. You can be in the wrong place because you turned at the wrong place. Okay. You have to have enough sense to know that you turned down the wrong road. But here she's saying, well, I'm here. This is where I guess I'm supposed to be. So I'm just going to stay here single and, perimenopausal and, wondering about my existence and getting counseling from this trans dudette. That's where I'm at, so, that's the article. I wanted to go through the article and pick through it and basically, talk about what it is that she was trying to convey to the readers. And I gotta say, I don't feel very good about this. And I'm a Tracee Ellis Ross fan. I thought she was a beautiful woman. I really liked her on Girlfriends. I kind of saw myself dating her, and what was the other one? The other one that was really, really sexual, that was kind of bohemian. I kind of liked her too. And I kind of liked the Darcy one with the big lips. I liked her a lot. Oh, well, anyway, I'm getting distracted here. But anyway, I mean, we can make bad decisions, and we have to know that the decisions that we made were not necessarily good ones. And I don't think Tracee's there. I think Tracee needs to trade in the trans guy for a real therapist and start straightening up her life a little bit. Maybe she can find a gentleman that she can spend the rest of her life with and be happy. I'm sure there's some gray bearded guys out here that look pretty good that are, that might be looking for an older woman like that. So she might need to try to come on back in to the fold, but Hollywood's a real treacherous place, and it's looking just as crazy as it always has been. I mean, it's just, I just don't know what to say about Hollywood nowadays. It just seems like a haven for, newfangled thinking and, transgenderism and alphabet mafia, control. It's all trying to spin this narrative of indoctrination into this new sexual space that looks like we're moving into. I hope I die before all of this comes into place, because I don't want to be around for that. It's unfortunate, but looks like where we're going, because nobody's fighting it. It's conquered every aspect of our lives, it would seem. But I digress. This was fun. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I hope you enjoyed my coverage of Miss Ross and her tale about, what it's like to be 50 and going through perimenopause and examining her life and not having kids and all that good stuff. But you guys let me know in the comments whether you liked it or you didn't, or if you had some points that you felt like I didn't cover, or you want to comment about some things that I did cover, whatever you want to do. I just like, interacting with you guys down in the comments. And I appreciate you guys. Please like, share, and subscribe. And people are still letting me know that the notifications are coming in sometimes and not coming in other times. So if you could hit that notification button every time you come and listen, then hopefully we can get this thing ironed out. I'm trying to grow my channel here. I'm hovering around this 1,200 here. But if you guys can help me get on up there, I'd appreciate it. And I appreciate all the support for the show, donations and whatnot. I thank you guys in my most humble fashion for all your support. So I will see you guys next time.
I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home, a long way from